All right, we are rocking and rolling. All right, our next presenter, he gave me a little bit of a kind of a different introduction, and we're going to do this Letterman style. So here are the top 10 fun facts about presenter Richard J. Bryan. Number 1, he was born in Bristol, England. Number 2, he now lives in Colorado with wife Melissa, 2 great kids, and Archie the Wonder Dog. Number 3, he still has an annoying British accent. Number 4, he comes from a 4th generation family-owned car dealership. Number 5, he became an overwhelmed CEO of the family business at the ripe old age of 28. Number 6, his dealership group had sales of $120 million, but was on the verge of bankruptcy, losing $3.5 million a year. Number 7, he's the first to admit he made a lot of mistakes. Number 8, he decided to bite the bullet and hire a team of A players, including a top-notch business coach. Number 9, he got innovative, set a clear vision, drank a lot of coffee, I thought that would say something else, and with the help of his team, turned the company around. Number 10, he's lived to tell you about it. A quick search online turned up the following. We've got Richard here, standard shot there. He kind of looks like a Wallace and Gromit character. Yeah, kind of got that English thing going. The other thing I noticed is that, think about this, if I had eyes that were that incredibly blue and a British accent and a few $100 million, my social life would have been completely different in the 20s. It would have just been amazing. He's an avid skier. And the last thing I noticed about Richard was that his name is Richard J. Bryan, and he titled his autobiography, Being Frank. So apparently the medicine is wearing off. He gave me some very sage advice. He said, Mike, the sooner you fall behind, the more time you'll have to catch up. All right, Richard, please give a warm Innovative Dealer Summit welcome to Richard J. Bryan.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Talk a bit.
Well, thank you. That was quite the introduction. I know you've seen a lot of speakers in the last couple of days, and there's been some very valuable content. I'm going to start a little bit differently. I'd like to ask you a question, and it's a little bit off the wall, but just bear with me. So, how many of you remember your first love? Well, I remember mine as if it was yesterday. She was beautiful. She had curves in all the right places. She lit up whenever I was around and made me feel like $1,000,000. She had a few more miles on the clock than I would have liked, but hey, they say love is blind, right? Her name was Lola. Let me tell you about her. Lola was a 1.6-liter fuel-injected Ford Orion. Gunmetal grey with just a fleck of silver in the paint that caught the sunlight just right. Absolutely gorgeous. And I remember one day I was back from university on a holiday, and Lola and I decided to take a drive. And as we meandered along through the English country lane, she handled like a dream. But then as I got closer to my hometown of Bristol, she started to hesitate, and Lola was never one to hesitate. I pulled over to the side of the road just as her engine failed. Now, I didn't really know what was wrong, but I did know that I'd have to call the local Ford dealership, which just happened to be owned by my family. So I set off to find a payphone. Remember payphones? And I got there and I thought, I know, I'll phone my father's secretary, Jean. She'll know what to do. Hello, can I speak to Jean Guest, please? Yes, it's Richard Bryan. Yes, Bryan. Yeah, yes, same as the dealership name. Yeah. Oh, okay, thanks. Gene, it's Richard. Is Dad there? No, don't disturb me. I've broken down. No idea. Cumberland Road. Oh, that'd be great if you could send some guys out. Oh, and Gene, don't mention anything to Dad. Okay, thanks. Bye. As I waited for the tow truck, all I could think was, brilliant. Now they're really going to think I'm the idiot son. Son of the owner of the largest Ford dealership in the city, and I couldn't even figure out how to start my own car. And with that, the tow truck turned up with 2 guys on board. Nigel, our most experienced mechanic, and his young apprentice, Charlie. Oh, Nigel, thank you so much. I don't know what's wrong with her. I've tried turning her over, nothing. Completely dead. I think it might be something to do with the fuel injection system. All right, mate. Give me the keys. Let's have a look. Nigel jumped in and started carrying out some tests. 2 minutes later, he came back round. He said, well, mate, it's definitely a fuel problem. You ain't got any. At this point, Charlie, laughing hysterically, fell out of the truck, grabbed a small empty gas can and said, all right, governor, as I'm here, do you want me to do the honours and fill her up? And I watched as he walked the 20 feet to the gas station I was parked next to. And just when I thought it couldn't get any worse, Nigel yelled, Charlie, show some respect to Mr. Bryan. This Einstein here is going to be our boss in a few years. 10 years later, when I was his boss, every time I walked through the workshop and saw him, he'd just look at me and go, I'd look right back at him and give him a quick, as if it was our little secret. But you see, I knew full well that he told everyone on the shop floor, and probably any bloke in the pub who'd care to listen. I can see him now in the Rose and Crown on a Friday night. All right, boys, time for our toast. We raise our beers and give 3 cheers. We do it all in fun. To Mr. Richard Bryan, his lordship, our boss, the idiot son. Sound familiar? I tell you what, that is what you have to put up with when you're the 4th generation in a family business, because you might be wearing a nice suit and calling yourself dealer principal, but unfortunately they still remember you when you were the idiot son. It was an auspicious start to my career as a dealer, and certainly not the last of my mistakes. In fact, I made many. And today I'd like to share with you just 3 of my more memorable failures. But I think we all have an opportunity to look at failure differently, to see it more as an opportunity rather than a dead end. Or as Henry Ford once said, failure is the opportunity to start again, this time more intelligently. So I was working as a sales exec at a large Ford dealership in Fairfax, Virginia. I was one of 30 commission-only salespeople. And I'd been doing this for about 6 months, and I'd hit my targets every month. And I thought, wow, this is actually not that difficult. And I got to a stage where I was almost getting a little bit bored, and so I started making up little challenges for myself. And don't ask me why, but on this one particular Saturday, I decided that I was going to try and sell a car without doing a demo, so no test drive. And in walked an elder couple from Arlington, Virginia, Holly and Bob, lovely people. And so I did a meet and greet, asked them some qualifying questions, and then started showing them some vehicles. And I thought it was all going terribly well, right up until the moment they walked out the dealership. And then I remember stood outside with a small gang of other salespeople. You know the guys I'm talking about. And we were there, and I was whinging and moaning. I was saying, God, I can't why is it always me? I get the tire kickers and time wasters, especially on a Saturday. It's just not fair. And then I looked up and I realized I was all alone. And then I heard it. Richard, you can start by taking your hands out your pockets. It was Andy, our general manager. He was a force to be reckoned with. No one messed with Andy. So, how'd you get on with that last couple? Looked like you were struggling a little bit. How'd the demo go? Oh, well, they weren't quite ready to buy a car, Andy, so I didn't think it was really worth doing a test drive. Really, and you used your months of experience in the business to make that decision all by yourself, did you? Never mind. We got a sale coming up this week. You can give them a call, get them back in, they can drive the vehicle then. I mean, you did get their name and number. Tell me you got that. Got their name? Holly and Bob from Marlington. Lovely people. At this point, I was invited into Andy's office for one of his famous motivational chats, which went something like this. First of all, I never want to hear you complaining about your problems. Everyone's got problems. 90% of people just don't care. The other 10%, they're pleased you got them. That's the guys you're competing against on the floor every day. So don't do that. And another thing, just because you've had some early success in this business, don't think for a minute that the fundamentals no longer apply to you. My experience is it's when people think they're successful that they start taking shortcuts, they get a bit cocky, and that's when they have problems. And so there it was, failure lesson number 1, don't get cocky. Never forget the fundamentals. I don't know about you, but have you ever had a situation where business is going well, and then suddenly you get diverted, you get sidetracked on some project. And the next thing you know, you stop doing the very things that made you successful in the first place. I mean, look at this guy. It's too late for him. He's definitely lost the plot. So my second failure story I want to share with you was about David. I want, for the purposes of this story, I want you to imagine that these are David's shoes. David was my finance director, and we came to work together because I was looking for a right-hand man to support me, a really solid numbers guy as we grew the business and added new franchises. And I was actually referred to David by a friend of mine. He worked for a large public company, competitor of ours. When I first met him, I thought, wow, he's an impressive guy. He was 6'3", pinstripe suit, certainly looked the part. He had a very impressive resume, and he interviewed really well. And then about halfway through the interview, I realized that we went to the same school. I thought, wow, this is great. So I hired him on the spot. I mean, what could possibly go wrong? He says to a room full of dealers. Well, it was about a month later when I started getting feedback from some of our customers and staff that David was just a little bit arrogant. So I did what I should have done a month before, and I started getting some references. And I phoned Bob, his former boss, no relation to Bob from Holly and Bob. And I said, Bob, David told me that the reason he was available was that you'd closed the local branch and made his job redundant. Is that true? There was a long silence. And finally, he said, do you mind if we take this conversation off the record? Have you ever had a moment where you just know you're going to get some honest feedback? He then went on to tell me, well, he said, yes, we did technically close the local branch, and his job was redundant. But he didn't tell you why, did he? We closed the local branch because it was the easiest way to get rid of David. He went on to tell me that he was not only arrogant, but he was lazy, entitled, and even worse, a bit of a bully. So with this newfound knowledge, what do you think I did? Absolutely nothing. You see, I wasn't really ready to admit to myself or to anyone else that I just made a huge hiring mistake. And so I persevered and hoped that things would get better, which they didn't. 6 months later, I ended up firing David and paying him 6 months' salary that he was entitled to as a director of the company. It was a very expensive mistake and one that I vowed never to make again. And so I started to develop a 7-step hiring process, which I used after that point. And I'm going to make that available to you today at the end of the program. So the lesson here was don't get sloppy. Never ignore the fundamentals, particularly when it comes to hiring. But my third and final story is really by far the most painful, because it's about a truck dealership. We had a large Iveco Ford truck dealership that I just could not get to grips with. It was loss-making, and whatever I did, I couldn't turn it around. We tried new systems, new management, even added a new franchise, but we were still bleeding cash at the rate of about $900,000 a year. Finally, I made the only decision that was left to me, and I remember getting together all the staff in a large truck workshop and reading them a small statement. It's with regret that the directors of the company have decided that due to unsustainable losses, we will be closing the dealership with effect from 1st of September. In other words, in a week's time, you're all out of a job. At the time, it felt like an absolutely catastrophic failure, both financially and emotionally. But looking back, I realized that I did what I had to do at the time to safeguard the other 400 people that worked for us. And actually, sometimes what you think is your failure can be your salvation. Because we sold the assets of that company, we then sold the land, and we used the cash we generated to invest in the rest of the business, to bring in new franchises and to get the company back into profit. So ultimately, it turned out quite well, but at the time, it was pretty tough. So never shrink from the tough calls. Embrace the fundamentals, particularly when it comes to making difficult decisions. And I want to just share with you something my business coach and mentor, Frank, used to say to me. You know, if you get that sort of gut feeling that you really need to do something, even if it's unpalatable, he used to say, don't just listen to that gut feeling, obey it. And that was certainly the case in this scenario. No, it wasn't a nice thing to do, but it actually meant that we were going to survive as a business. But I want to just introduce you to someone in closing who knew a lot about adversity. My great-grandfather, James Bryan, and he was one tough guy. He was called the governor, and he actually went from being a taxi driver to the owner of one of the largest Ford dealerships in the UK. But in the process, he had to overcome not one but 2 world wars. He had to also deal with some very difficult financial times in the late 20s, early 30s, but he still persevered, and he managed to overcome all of that and build a great business. And I got to know him pretty well because he lived with us for the last 12 years of his life. And that's how I know that this is a picture of him in a good mood. He was tough. And he said to me once, "Richard, it's not that people don't have dreams. It's that they don't dream big enough. And if you don't dream big, you can't possibly be expected to reach your full potential." So with that in mind, when you leave here today, I hope that the vision for your business or for your dealership, I hope that you dream big. But I also hope that you dream big enough that your dreams will always outlive your failures. Thank you very much. Just on the 7-step hiring process, if you would like a copy of that, just text Frank to 72,000 on your phone and we'll send it to you. And I think you also get access to an interview with Frank and I, talking about what we did to turn the business around. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Give it up for Richard J. Bryan. Some incredible lessons. And I do like the idea of dreaming big. Richard has his book, Being Frank, in the back of the room. And what he's doing is, the book is free, but he does have a donation jar out, and all donations will go to the Colorado Clear the Air Foundation, which is a foundation that's dedicated to taking high-emitting vehicles high-emitting polluting vehicles off the road, and it's a wonderful cause. So grab a book on your way out, and ultimately help a good cause if you feel the desire.